Welcome to the Skiffy and Fanny Show and our latest episode of Signal Boost.
2 or 3 years ago, it was just another snake cult.
A snake cut
podcast.
Or a snake cult?
2 or 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, it was just another snake cult.
So something I would join, Trish. For those that can't tell, there are
I guess it is.
I have snake pages.
I did wear my snake cult shirt, so.
Oh, that's perfect. We can start one together. That's great. I have snakes. You have shirts. We got merch, and I got critters. There we go. Sorry, I'm Sean.
I'm Trish.
And on today's Signal Boost, we have Oliver Brackenbury and Molly Tanzer here to talk with us about Sword and Sorcery, the subgenre, and the backer kit project to fund issues 8, 9, and 10 of New Edge Sword and Sorcery.
Yay!
Yeah.
Hello.
Very pretty.
I think so. Yeah.
So, yep. Welcome to the show, Oliver and Molly. Could you each tell our viewers and listeners briefly who you are and how you're associated with this project? And we'll get in more depth a little bit later.
Sure, I'll go first, I guess. Since my name is Oliver Brackenbury of Brackenbury Books, I am the editor and publisher of New Edge Sword and Sorcery magazine. We debuted in the fall of 2022, and I'm happy to say we're still here and going pretty strong. We've expanded into books as well, but tonight we're here to talk mainly about issues 8, 9, and 10, and the crowdfund for it, which ends noon Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 14th. So you got about a week.
Okay. I gotta get this out quick. Okay. I'll make sure it's out. Don't you worry.
The VOD will be up soon anyway.
Yeah.
They can point to the VOD at least.
Perfect. And Molly, who are you? You want to tell us?
My name is Molly Tanzer. I am a writer. I am the author of The Weird Western Vermilion and the sapphic sword and demon retelling of Picture of Dorian Gray, Creatures of Will and Temper. And most recently, I've been working with Oliver and the estate of C.L. Moore to revive Jurel of Jory. And so that's why I'm here, because there will be a new Jurel of Jory novelette in one of the issues for this coming year. Maybe 8, is that correct?
Issue 9, but fair enough.
Issue 9, I was so close. I'm not good for my math skills. I just write, so.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, no, it'll be in issue 9, and it will be the third official tale that we've done in collaboration with the estate of C.L. Moore. They're all officially licensed.
That is very cool, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get into the details and more questions for Oliver and Molly, we have a reminder for our viewers and listeners. Please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com. If you aren't already here, join us on Twitch for Sean's Alphabet streams every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be part of our interactive live streaming format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show. Help support us through our Patreon and be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, or other special Patreon-only events on Discord.
Okay, so let's get into start kind of basic and then get into some weeds. I kind of want to start with like a two-parter question. One is how would you define sword and sorcery, and then why are you so interested in it?
Okay, so I kind of joke that arguing over the definition of sword and sorcery is itself a facet of sword and sorcery because it happens so much. And I honestly find it kind of entertaining. I think if it's good-natured, then it's a fun way to explore why you love something, right? My favorite definition is one put out by Brian Murphy, who has a great book called Flame and Crimson, A History of Sword and Sorcery. I don't publish it. I'm not asked to promote it. I just love it. And he does this kind of flexible thing with 7 points of commonly found things in the genre. So I'll rattle off a few of those because his definition is kind of my North Star. So sword and sorcery commonly has outsider protagonists, right? They tend to be people who are not like they're living on the margins, and they're in some other way very different from everyone else around them, right? So you think thieves and brigands and whatnot, but also Elric of Melibene was the emperor of his people. You think, how's that marginal? But he was the only member of his people who thought maybe sleeping with your family members and torturing folk is bad, and that just got worse from there for him. So so you can have like outsider protagonists. They tend to have personal motivations. If they're being heroic in some fashion, it tends to be kind of a side effect of just trying to survive in a crazy situation. Oftentimes they just want money, and then they get sucked into something a bit more beyond that basic concern. So I find that honestly relatable. For my day-to-day life, I'm rarely trying to save the kingdom. Rarely. It tends to be historically inspired because the sort of predecessor of Sword and Sorcery was historical adventure fiction. That's how you got the very first SNS tale. Was Robert E. Howard couldn't sell one of such tale, and so he was like, well, Weird Tales is open for submissions. I'll put some snake cults and stuff in there. Yeah, okay. And then off we go. Sword and Sorcery. Not to be reductive, but that's the gist of it. You also get things like, horror elements are a big part of it because it was born back in the 30s when like genre, late 20s, early 30s, when genre was a bit more messy, which I like. And then also like the horror, sort of supernatural elements tend to be dark and mysterious. You're unlikely to find magic systems in Sword and Sorcery, which again, I like. I like my fantastic. I'm a little less drawn to like a goblin with a +1 sword than I am like a freakish thing that's a unique creation of the story, and sorcery that tends to devour the user alive at some point, that kind of thing. Gosh, there's two more, but I mean, I've been talking for a minute, so that's kind of the gist of it, right? Like Sword and Sorcery tends to be like a little more low down, a little more, I say gritty, but not like dirty, not like grim dark, just more grounded. And even if you're reading about someone who's like very, very strong and capable, like say, the poster boy for it, Conan, he's really buff and all the ladies want to get to know him. But I can relate to him because like he's human, he's flesh and bone, and he, tends to get caught up in things that are bigger than him. And sometimes when he runs into supernatural stuff, he's actually afraid of it. And he's not a chosen one. Like that's a trope you really don't tend to see in SNS, and that's to my preferences. So yeah, that's I can give a whole TED talk, but I think that's enough to answer what it is. And I have talked a little bit about what appeals about it to me. Like I said, I find it more relatable. I connect more with the characters than I tend to in like epic or high fantasy, by the way, which I've enjoyed. Let's be clear, it's not about either or, but this is my favorite flavor of ice cream. And I really like how the fantastic elements, like I said, tend to be not quantified and tend to be a bit more mysterious. And sorcery tends to be something that's very strange and dangerous and not like a technology by another name. I'm always a little baffled when I read a story where someone uses magic light. And I'm like, you could light a torch. Why did you have to study the souls of demons or whatever, just to like see your book you're reading? It just feels funny to me. It also was born in the format of short stories. Now, of course, you can find longer works of Sword and Sorcery. I've published them, but I'm a big fan of short stories, novelettes, novellas, funky little novels that are like 60 pages or whatever. So I also enjoy the fact that it tends to be shorter and tends to have quicker moving pacing. Just my preference, I find, especially as I get older. I used to read phone books, but more and more these days, I'm like, oh, can I just like get in and get out and have a great time and have it be really like kinetic and fun? All right, great, And then I think the last thing I'll say, because again, I literally could talk for an hour on this. The last thing I'll say is I also like something that I find I'm thinking about more and more, which is that Sword and Sorcery feels very much a genre of the body. I find that most Sword and Sorcery stories I love really get into like lust and battle prowess, like sex and violence, but also athleticism, and like the five senses tend to be really engaged. Like I really feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm like the body is being tested in it, and something about that again is very relatable. I'm thinking about like my human body. I've got one. I'm not an elf or a chosen one or a demigod or whatever. So yeah, that's something else I like about it. But I'll stop myself there because I could easily eat up the whole thing on that.
Molly, do you want to jump in?
Molly, yeah. Your take on sword and sorcery definition and what drew you to it.
There's a good joke that sword and sorcery is when the snake is big.
Yes.
And I think that that's a great definition of it. I guess I'm a very visual person. My background is actually in visual arts. And I guess when I'm trying to summon sword and sorcery vibes in my writing, I think about the illustrations of Frank Frazetta, which is such a classic pull. But at the same time, I think his visual style, both the the focus on the body that Oliver was talking about, the dynamic posing, and then also the sort of classical painterly style that he he was a painter. He was, he worked in a studio with oil paints and acrylics and things. And so I think that classical training that is sort of diverted into this incredibly pulpy, sensational form, I think is very much what I think about when I'm drawing on that side of my creative impulses, right? And so I work in that way. I like that sort of point by point definition that comes up, and I think that it does work because I think it is hard with like low fantasy and grimdark. Like, how does Sword and Sorcery distinguish itself? And I do think it is a lot of the time the shorter format, and I don't think that Sword and Sorcery is necessarily grimdark, even if it does incorporate a sort of less heroic angle. And I say this, like, I love grimdark. Like, I just finished The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, and I'm like, I'm back. I love it. It's so good. But I think when I'm reading Sword and Sorcery, I do want to be carried along for like 45 to 55 minutes of Sword and Sorcery rather than sort of getting into multiple reading sessions of multiple hours that are building on itself and building and building. So I don't know. I guess that's sort of where I go for it. But I do stick by Sword and Sorcery is when the snake is big. I think that is pretty much the best definition I've ever seen.
Can I add something real quick to that? First of all, credit to Discord user BearG for making Sword and Sorcery is when the snake is big on our Discord a while ago,
Oh,
and
I
that
didn't know.
seems to have funny enough found legs. But also, I actually recently was talking with Grimdark magazine in an interview, and they were like, "So, what's the relation between SS and Grimdark?" And some people say that Grimdark is like the child of SNS, but I disagree because I really think Grimdark is more in conversation on average with epic and like high fantasy. It tends to be the gritty mirror to fellowships and so forth. But I do think SNS and Grimdark do have that thing of the body in common. With SNS, it tends to be a bit more vitality and, like I say, like lust and violence and so forth, athleticism. With Grimdark, there's a joke I heard somewhere where it was like, how do you tell if it's SS or Grimdark? How much piss is in the story? And if it's a lot of piss, it's Grimdark. And that is funny, but it also kind of brings attention to the fact that when the body is a factor in Grimdark, it tends to be more about its failings. It tends to be more about injury and effluvia and so forth. So I just think, again, this is a broad city way of measuring, but I think it's not without merit. So I think Grimdark and SNS are more like adjacent cousins than they are like, one coming after the other.
That's really interesting. I do like that. I'm going to sit with that body thing. That's really interesting because I do think what has drawn me to Sword and Sorcery, which has been like a love of mine since I was in high school, is definitely the dynamism and like, I mean, it's hard with the heroic angle, right? Like we can get into sort of the problems and pitfalls of Sword and Sorcery, of which there are many, because like things that focus on the body can sort of get to the sort of essentialist body, right-wing problematic purity stuff that we're seeing a lot that I don't necessarily want to get into and harsh everyone's Friday night. But I do think that it's something that has to be negotiated with Sword and Sorcery, whereas I do think that you're right, that with Grimdark we do see sort of less of a negotiation and more of is it a celebration of disgustingness? But I mean, it deserves it, right? We're all human beings, and I think that's really interesting.
Well, and to SNS and what the pitfall you mentioned, I mean, to me, that's all about, well, how do we interpret the holy texts and how do we build on them? For example, I mean, Premium Muhammad had a story with a lovely heavier set assassin character in issue, I want to say 5 that came out last year. It's just about the choices you make, but then that comes back to the new edge Sword and Sorcery of it all, which we have not yet been asked about, so maybe I'll shut up.
Oh. Trish, I'll throw it to you. You take the next one.
Sure. I'm curious about your feelings about Sword and Sorcery versus, say, Sword and Planet or Planetary Romance. I actually recently started reading an arc of Molly Tanzer's and Side by Side They Wander, which I would so far call space opera heist caper book. And just wondering, what parallels, what commonalities and differences would you see with that kind of thing?
Molly, do you want to go first or shall I?
I guess I was summoned. So I will. I Yeah, I do think that there's a. I mean, I think one of the things that has always appealed to me about sort of space opera is it does sort of feel a little bit more like sword and sorcery in space. It's less hard science most of the time. And I like that about it. I like that we're zipping around in space and there's planets and stuff, and we're not worried about like how we got there. And I do think that sense of, I mean, gosh, sense of wonder is just such an old-fashioned term to invoke when talking about science fiction and fantasy, but it does evoke that sense of wonder that I think we really do get with sword and sorcery, where we have these enormous showpiece sets, and you're kind of going from like situation to situation, and that dynamism I think is really important to both of those genres. I actually, you mentioned my forthcoming novella, and I actually wrote that before I ended up getting hooked up with Oliver and Sword and Sorcery. But I was kind of channeling that urge to write something like really quick. I tend to be a longer form writer more than a shorter form writer, and I was challenging myself to try to write something that it's like blink if you miss it. And I think that's one of my favorite things about Sword and Sorcery, and also with space opera. In terms of planetary romance, I think I'm going to actually kick that over to Oliver, who I think we did have like a Sword and planetary romance issue of New Edge. So I think as an editor of such, he might have more authoritative things to say.
I mean, I certainly have some thoughts, but yeah, no, it's true. Issue 7 that came out last year was our first theme issue. Or special issue, and I decided to go with Sword and Planet, which to me feels like Sword and Sorcery's like older science fantasy cousin, right? Because Edgar Rice Burroughs kicked it off a good 17 years, 18 years before Robert E. Howard started SNS rolling. But yeah, I really like it. I am not quite as versed in it as I am with SNS, but yeah, I think there's commonalities like Molly mentioned. There's like that life-affirming, thundering forward, momentum that tends to be in the stories. Sword and Planet, as opposed to space opera, I tend to think of as being grounded in one space, and absolutely like one planet, and absolutely you can have stories that zoom in and out of that, right? Like, I mean, people often say Dune is kind of space opera or space Sword and Planet, depending on what chapter you're reading. But I think definitely like Sword and Planet tends to be fewer big factions and universe girdling things, or if they exist, they're distant. It's all in this one planet, which is a character unto itself. The monsters are the ecosystem. The character is pretty much always a fish out of water from somewhere else. I think that not that you have to be copying the old Barsoom model, but I do think like it's been there from the start. And actually, for our special issue, I was like, well, we saw like a Confederate soldier on another former Confederate soldier on a planet. Let's see like a bunch of other people. So my memorandum to all of the authors was, I was like, okay, we're going to take this basic shape and we're going to do it different for each one. So you pick a person from somewhere in relatively modern times. I think I said back as far as 1500. And somewhere else on planet Earth from some other profession, and then stick them on another world. And each person could pick like one planet from our world. And I was like, for the science of it all, remember the science I want is like pulp science from the 1800s to like 1940s. Like Venus is covered in jungles, et cetera, et cetera. So like it's think vaguely, thematically. Don't worry about science. And so yeah, I think, like I said, I think of it as kind of a fun relative of Sword and Sorcery, and there's definitely a lot of overlap and a lot of room to do new things with it. I've said if enough people buy that issue and tell us they want more, we might actually do New Edge Sword and Planet one day. I kind of have like a digest size full color thing dancing in my head, so we'll see what happens. But yeah.
So we've mentioned that this subgenre, Sword and Sorcery, has a fairly long history from the 30s or maybe the 20s or so.
28.
And it was very popular while the pulps were popular, and then it kind of declined for 20 years or so. And then in the 70s and 80s, you had all the clonans, which were basically reskinning. Well, that's too. So
but yeah, I know what you mean.
I was just leading up to give us a little digest of the history and the decline, and now the rise again of Sword and Sorcery.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's basically a first wave, a second wave, and third wave ? So yeah, first wave was kicked off by Howard and quickly joined by others in the absolute end of the 20s through the 30s. Arguably survived a little bit into the 40s, but honestly, after Howard died, it kind of steadily, went down. And then, there were some reprints of Conan in the 50s, but really it kicked off in the 60s. And then that's when you had sort of what a lot of people, sort of older readers remember as like, their golden age, right? 60s, 70s, through to like early to mid 80s, depending on who you ask. And I mean, I talked with David C. Smith, an author who came in near the end. He was first published in the late 70s, and he watched it in real time. And I said to him, look, I hear a lot of people talk about why did it collapse in the 80s? What was it? Was it the movies? Was it the, oh no, influx of women editors, which some people bring up, ha ha ha. And he says, no. What it was the fact that on average, the people publishing SNS in that period found something that worked, and so they just drove it into the ground. And it's unfair to the more innovative writers like Charles Saunders or Jan Ray Frank or Jessica Amanda Samuelson, who came in kind of on the end as the curtain was coming down, and they were making great, cool, different stuff that just unfortunately, kind of fell with the boring stuff. But that's basically just what happened. And then you got a new generation of editors who were and readers who were like, well, we've been seeing the lady clinging onto the guy's leg for like a while now. Can we have something else, please? And authors like Mercedes Lackey were like, yes, here's something new. So I mean, that was just natural evolution. But so it kind of like, it didn't entirely vanish, but largely like lost its luster and tended to show up more as like satire and parody and whatever. Conan himself never entirely went away, but for quite a while. And there were dedicated people who like kind of kept the torch lit and tried to bring it back in the 2000s. I'm thinking particularly of Howard Andrew Jones, who was absolutely a giant upon whose shoulders we're standing. I really strongly recommend folks look up Howard Andrew Jones, read his work. But he was also a big community builder in 2000s through 2010s. And then you started to see things kind of like, light's coming on again, like mid 2010s. Like there was a new publisher, and Howard got a really great magazine called Tales of the Magician's Skull going, and I want to say 2017. And then really like 2020, it started to like really catch on fire again. We're seeing more and more publications come out each year, more and more readers, which is vital. And I'd like to think, we are just one. I mean, I can't stress enough, I'm not taking the credit here, geez, but we are here at New Age and Sorcery one sign that something's going right, because there's enough people to sustain not only our magazine coming in and growing, but also we've expanded, as I say, into anthologies, novellas, and so forth. We reprinted a novel by David last year, which is why he was on my mind, Sometime Lofty Towers. And, knock on wood, but like so far so good. So far things are growing. I mean, this year's crowdfund is doing substantially better than last year's. And I'd like to take some credit for being creating a great product and, being a good salesman or whatever. But it's also definitely a sign that there's people who want this, right? I could be making the most incredible thing on earth and be the most incredible, carnival barker on earth, but if nobody's listening, who cares? So, and in my experience, for example, when commissioning authors, and I think there's a degree of this happening also with, chasing readers and retailers and so forth. To take one example, there's an author named Premi Muhammad, who is a great Canadian author. I strongly recommend her. I knew of her before I even thought to approach her for Sword and Sorcery, because she just writes great climate fiction and other things. I never would have thought to ask her until I was on Blue Sky and I saw her posting a thread where she was talking about like her annual reread of the Elric books and posting funny doodles that she did of scenes from said books. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, wait, what? And I reached out to her and she was like, of course I want to do a story. And now she's on her third year of working with us. My point being, I think there's a lot of people who still love the genre and just don't talk about it as much because it hasn't been, it's been fallow for so long. Or maybe some people who are like 40 plus, like remember, the B movie sort of like tired era of the late 80s. And so they're kind of like, I don't know, Sword and Sorcery, what was that even? And like we kind of forget that it's actually insanely rich and like elastic and powerful as a genre. And so, I've certainly made it my mission. I'm lucky enough to call this my full-time job since recently, to proselytize and spread the good word. And here I am doing that right now, I guess. That actually, like, it's a phenomenal genre. It can do phenomenal things, and it can do so much more than it did on the back end of the second wave, where it got a little, in a rut. I hope that answers your question about the history of it. Are we in a third wave now? I hope so. I hope the wave keeps building. I mean, it can take time for these things to go. Like I said, Conan was getting reprinted in the mid 50s, and it wasn't really a going concern until somewhere later in the 60s. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I mean, it was born in the late 20s through 30s, a time of economic despair and rising fascism, and here we are, baby. So, Sorry, folks. Before this came on, I said I do have pitch black humor sometimes. There was. Yeah.
All right. Well, Molly, just from your author perspective, talk to me about your love of Sword and Sorcery, and particularly, since we were just talking about history, what draws you to Jirel of Jory and makes you want to write your own stories about her?
Well, Jirel is such an interesting figure. She has been a hotly debated topic, I think, for a long time. I think she has sort of a reputation, which is both deserved and not. She is definitely very id and libido fueled. And I think that because she is a strange mix of feminine but aggressive, like libido fueled, but also like action and motion based, I don't think it was very easy to kind of carry her along into the strong female character mode of the mid teens and sort of when we started, I mean, even earlier than that, like maybe even sort of that urban fantasy boom in like 2007, 2008, where we started seeing a different kind of woman protagonist. And I think because she doesn't quite fit the mold, she was unfairly left behind. And I'm glad to be able to be a part of her story because I think there's so much in the Jirel stories. I mean, one, C.L. Moore was a fantastic writer. I think that her skill at the typewriter is incredibly inspiring. I mean, not all sword and sorcery is like the sentences, but C.L. Moore is really great at the sentences. And her vision for that is really, I mean, she's just such a clear, beautiful writer. And then Jirel herself, I think, now that we're in a post Game of Thrones world where we're letting people be messier, I think that it's really a great time for her to be coming back because we don't need our heroes to be paragons. We don't need our women to be perfect. We don't need to be able to make a point necessarily about like that there's less reparative work that we're doing, and I think that it's great that we're allowing for a sort of greater diversity of a protagonist and one who may not be in line politically with what we would necessarily want. That said, I mean, with my own stories, I have tried to, I don't want to say modernize, that's not the right word, but I have tried to update her a little bit in one way specifically, which is that I always try to give Jirel, I don't want to say always, but I frequently try to give Jirel friends. She's very much a woman alone. I mean, I think it's very fair to say that she was an exceptional woman among men as sort of her character in the C.L. Moore stories. And these days, we're less, I mean, I too love it when there's like more than one woman in a story. It's like, hooray, especially, if they're talking to one another. And she gets that with antagonists, but she never has friends or peers. And that's one thing that I have tried to do with my Jirel stories is not necessarily make her less messy. In fact, I love how messy she is. But she's existing in a world where she's not the only person who's out there trying to right wrongs or be out there with a sword she's not necessarily insulting people by calling them womanish, which is, again, like we all have our favorite parts of the Jirel stories and the parts that we can leave that behind. And so I've tried to give her a more 21st century voice while keeping all of the problematic, messy, like what is Jirel after? Like what is she doing? Like why is she motivated? That I think makes her so compelling to begin with. And we've let male characters have a broader range of what they can be and accomplish and still be relatable or at least like interesting. And I'm glad to be part of that now. Since, I mean, when I started working with Oliver with these, and I told some friends who are avid readers and who are very interested in science fiction and fantasy and the history, they were like, we've never read a single Jirel story. We only know her from the Filk. And I was like, I'm even more devoted now to helping bring back this character because these lost women of the weird, like Grey Laspina, C.L. Moore, like we've always been here writing these stories, but that's not necessarily what has been preserved. And so being able to have such an outlet like New Edge that's producing like a beautiful magazine as well as sort of very entrenched in the genre, I think is the ideal location for us to bring Jarrell back and allow her to sort of have the scope that we've seen with Conan, with Red Sonja, multiple authors, and with Lovecraft's work. Like, one of the reasons that he has remained in the public imagination is, well, one, like, there's no real estate to wrangle with, and two, like, so many people have wanted to take up the mantle of writing these stories, and I think that can only be a good thing for keeping writers vital and alive and keeping people caring about them.
If I can just add one little thing to that, I remember in terms of, Molly, what you're saying about women protagonists should be allowed to be as messy as the men. When you were kind of talking to me, we were getting to know each other, and I was like, so what's your take on the character? Two things you said that grabbed me that feel of that spirit. One, you were like, well, I think Jarell's like, she's a woman of action. She's not much of a thinker. She's not dumb, but she'll just like go forward before she'll come up with a plan. And I was like, yes. And then you're like, also, she has terrible taste in men. And I was like, go on. There were other things you mentioned too that I liked at the time, but those two stand out to me as like, yeah, let her be a bit of a lunkhead, runs forward into things and makes bad calls on who to kiss. Like, this is the thing. I think I agree with you very much. It feels like in many ways maybe the final form of allowing a greater diversity of characters to have as much freedom and fun and variety as the male characters, the cis male straight guys anyway, is, yeah, let them be messy. Let them be messy.
That's part of the mission statement for New Edge, right? The diversity, broad background, broad range of characters.
I have a snappy tagline. So the snappy tagline is made with love for the classics and an inclusive boundary-pushing approach to storytelling. It's this idea that so often I feel people see things as an either-or, and I'm like, no, you can have it all, baby. And to me, it's kind of like, yeah, you can make something that's like rooted in, like, you can take forward what was really cool about that genre, which like is not unique in having problematic elements when you go back to the past. I mean, you go back 5 minutes with any genre, you find vocabulary you don't want to repeat and so forth. But yeah, not unique in that. But true, it is the case that if you read the further back you go in SNS's canon, you do want to kind of like be wary sometimes, depending on which author, et cetera, et cetera. And it is sort of easy mode for me as a white cisgender, straight guy to read that stuff. But there's stuff to learn. There's stuff to bring forward. There's stuff to enjoy. There's maybe a little harder to find in mainstream fiction right now. There's treasure in those dungeons, and the whole notion of New Edge is this idea of like you take forward those things, you leave behind the elements that are kind of gnarly, and you burnish, knock off the rust, you burnish that new edge. Right, that's where that comes from. So yeah, that's absolutely our thing. And I mean, I've set myself a tightrope, of course, as a publisher, because sometimes people read a story and they go, oh, well, that's too much like the classics. That's not very new. And I'm like, okay, all right. And other times people read it and they go, well, that was very new, but it didn't feel like Sword and Sorcery. It's too different. And I'm like, shit, okay. But sorry to make fun of the mocking voice, but it's hard not to fall into when you're saying these things, because I shouldn't use the mocking voice, because this is fair, right? We all come into these things with it from our own perspective and so forth. But yeah, basically, I set myself up to get it from both ends, right? It's not trad enough, it's not new enough, but c'est la vie. And I think some of the most exciting stuff that you can develop anywhere in anything is by finding that tightrope and like not a middle ground, because that sounds like it's like a milquetoast compromise. Absolutely not. We have a very specific vision of the magazine, but just kind of like I say, like taking the good stuff everywhere which way you can and putting it all together and trying your best and knowing that this won't be the last story you ever write, this won't be the last issue you ever publish, and just being open and transparent, being in conversation with the readers and community and stuff. I've been doing editorials, of course, and we have our Discord and so forth, but we're actually going to introduce letters this year, because I think we've reached that point where I want to have people writing in, and it's fine if they want to tell me I smell bad and my mom smells bad and my story smells bad. As long as there's something interesting in there, sure, I'll put it in the letters page. I don't care, man. That's fun. I'm very lucky. I live in Toronto, where we have the Merrill, as in Judith Merrill, collection of speculative fiction. It is an incredible archive. If you're ever passing through there, also they have an online component. Authors and publishers and so forth, for heaven's sakes, go there, do research, or even if you're just a reader, go there and do the tour. It's incredible. Over 80,000 items, including miles of pulps. I've been reading like Conan's and the original like Weird Tales printings there. so fun. My point is that when I read those old mags, you know, I love to go back and I love to see the editorials because now I feel kind of a kinship with them, and I love to read the letters pages. And I gotta tell you, and by we I mean, you know, the people who love these things, we've always been like this. You read letters pages from 1929, and it's a forum post, you know. You read an editorial from like 1971 or whatever. I'm probably messing up the year, but you know, it's Michael Moorcock editing New Worlds, and he's just giving shit to some other editor. Like, it's actually kind of incredible how like less restrained a lot of editorials are. You go back to old magazines. I'm all trying to be polite and like, why don't I just like call people's mothers terrible things in editorials? Apparently that was fine going back decades. What am I doing? You know, but my point is, what was my point? I guess my point is New Edge, what it's sad about. Okay, yeah, is that I love that we have this lovely continuity, this lovely history, and this genre that is older than some, I suppose, but young. I mean, it's less than 100 years old. And actually, one of the joys of SNS is that the canon is relatively small, so that if you really get into it, you can kind of like read pretty much all the good stuff in like 5 years from like the 20th century, if you really like, you know, lean into it. And so, you know, I've still got some stuff to read, you know, everybody does, but yeah, you get my idea. So my point is, it's kind of fun because you can very quickly get like kind of a good, decent knowledge to like chat about the classics with people as well as keep on top of the contemporary stuff. And yeah, I just, I'm really excited by it. Obviously, I'd have to be as to get into the get rich quick scheme of indie publishing. You know, I find it just such a, like I said, it's a genre that is both coming back to my whole walking the tightrope, getting everything in one plate routine here. You know, I feel it is a genre that is both very specific, which I like because specificity means you can tell people what something is relatively quickly, and authors, Molly, you know, have creative restraints that can breed creative decisions that you might not have had otherwise, which I think is always interesting. You know, before I did this, I was a screenwriter, and just page count alone is so tight in those things, you know, it forces interesting decisions. But yeah, but also, it's very, very elastic. In fact, I just remembered a metaphor I used a lot when we were first pitching the magazine. I was trying to figure out, like, how do I, you know, and I was mentioning that Brian Murphy definition as like 7 common elements. I was like, well, imagine like a berserk wrestling ring with 7 posts. And those posts are like the 7 common factors. Like, you got to have those, like those mark, you know, those, or some of those anyway, that marks like boundaries. But then what runs between those posts in a wrestling ring? A super elastic rope you can stretch back and leap off of and do all kinds of cool moves. That to me is sword and sorcery. And the fact that some of those posts in particular, I think a lot about outsider protagonists, for example. Well, I mean, doesn't that make it a genre that's already kind of foundationally geared towards more diverse authors and protagonists, right? And that's something we tried to lean into with the magazine, you know. So yeah, you can do a lot with it. I love it. You know what it is, and you can do a lot with it. You can draw on its past, but not be constrained by it. You can build on it. You can do so much. So that's, I guess, the nut of the ethos, which somehow we got here. I got carried away there. Sorry.
It's all good. A little while back, I can't remember who said the comment of the like the lady clasping onto the man's leg in the pictures. Was that you, Molly?
No, that was
Oliver. Was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay, I would very much like the reverse image, which is a man clutching to a woman's leg. I think that'd be an amusing gender flip. I imagine it exists already.
Cartoons of that kind.
Yeah,
I was gonna say it's like satire. It's been done. I can't name the specific book or whatever, but I'm sure like Terry Pratchett's Cohen the Barbarian, maybe, you know, like all kinds of stuff in like the very late 70s and through the 80s and 90s. I mean, not to prove what you said. I love satire. I love deconstructions. I've enjoyed many of them. Like a lot of people, I've got like a big hardcover of Watchmen on my shelf. You know, the superhero deconstruction. But I do find that you can only go so far with it. I find you can't go that deep with it. So what I tend to preach right now is I really like to ask authors to bring me specificity, but also more so what you were saying, sincerity. You know, give me, I don't know, 2 trans women, and one of them's hanging on their leg on this cover, and the other one's hanging on the other leg the next cover. If we got to hang on a leg, you know, like give me something that's like something I haven't seen before, maybe, but also something that's specificity, but also something that just is very sincere. Because I think when we chase sincerity in genre fiction, that's when we get to the really cool places. And I don't just mean like places that are like, I don't know, complex and I can write a paper about it. I mean places that make you really feel. You know, I enjoy the bark chuckle that satire gets from me. I enjoy the ooh, that's edgy that like deconstruction sometimes gets from me. But I remember for the rest of my life sometimes the deep in my chest feeling that sincerity brings. And so maybe regardless of limbs and hanging off of them, that's the thing. That's like the North Star that I'm chasing as editor of the magazine.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I thought immediately went to a game I played a couple times in the 80s, Macho Women with Guns, and those had the that kind of cover that Sean is talking about. But that reminds me of a question Prince Justin asked earlier in the
about
chat.
RPGs.
How do you think the rise of tabletop RPGs, like D&D and Ars Magica and everything, have influenced the development of the sword and sorcery genre? Obviously, they take a lot of influences from it, but how about going back in the other direction?
I was born to answer this question, but I feel like I've been talking a lot. Molly, do you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I'm an avid RPG player. I have been for a long time, and I do think that. I mean, it's funny, Oliver, you were talking a little bit about like 2020 being the time that we saw like a little bit more of resurgence of that. But of course, 2020 was when a lot of us started going like, what do we do for fun now? Like we can't hang out. And we saw an enormous rise in people going to D&D and other games like that. And I, of course, was on the vanguard. I was already playing online with a D&D group. But I think that sort of we were doing a lot of escaping in 2020. We were on a lot of levels, and I think RPGs help us with that. And I do think like D&D is one of those interesting things where it's so heroic at times, especially if you read a lot of the material. And I like the work that they've been doing to also bring a new edge to D&D with their sort of retooling the player's guide and to be more inclusive and taking away the word like fantasy races, which was always like, I don't know. But I think there's a spirit there that can actually be very sword and sorcery. I'm thinking about like the Baldur's Gate game, Baldur's Gate 3, which I have put in many an hour on, and you do not have to play that as the person who's going to save the world. You can absolutely be a low fantasy hero who is out for yourself and who is not trying to like save anybody. Like, and I think the potential to explore those different roles and to situate yourself like, well, am I roguish? Am I truly heroic? And that ability to dream and to sort of feel in different directions has been in conversation with sort of these different sort of genre, the splitting of the genres that we've been seeing for so long. Like I have a friend who would say that there's two types of, when it comes to politics or genres, there's lumpers and there's splitters, right? There are people who really want to get in there with like the real differences between this, that, and the other thing. And then there are people who are like, well, but aren't we all writing science fiction and fantasy? Like, isn't it all speculative fiction, Ms. Atwood? Like, there's all kinds of things to be having. There's different ways of envisioning. I love that quote. I don't mean to harsh on Margaret Atwood. She's actually like a big fan of our genre, but I do enjoy that sort of, no, it's speculative fiction.
I mean, I live in the same city as her, know people who bump into her, so, go on, sorry.
Yeah. It's not just squids. Yeah, like I do think that the potential of imagination that we're seeing, that you are allowed to sort of cultivate and individualize in tabletop gaming, is very able to be sword and sorcery-esque because you are centering the self, and you can choose to work with your companions or you can choose not to. And I think that that's much more in the vein of sword and sorcery than necessarily like heroic fantasy, which of course has been in conversation with D&D since its advent. But I do think that we have a lot to thank with the Grimdark Coalition for opening up to, different kinds of visions of what you might look like and what you might be able to do within a fantasy environment. And, as someone who started her tabletop journey playing Warhammer Fantasy Role Play, the like 80s edition of it, like, I have always sort of been in that space of like, well, we're just here in the dirt and the mud and we're a rat catcher and like that kind of thing. And it was sort of a culture shock when I got into D&D, but I think that D&D has made that space more open to darkness. I mean, I'm in a Curse of Strahd campaign right now, and that is like not exactly, let's save the world. It's like, I don't know, we're gonna die. And so I think that sort of fear of the real risks and the real stakes, I think, is also a very sword and sorcery thing when it's at its best. I mean, you see a lot of critiques of sort of the Clonan where it's like, this guy's not going to die. But I do think with our newer forms of it, you have that sort of danger of like everyone's at risk. Everyone is a potential victim of this, and that can be really juicy in a sword and sorcery context as well.
Do you want me to answer that as well, or shall we move on?
If you have thoughts on it, sure.
Oh, it's just, I don't know. We actually, I
If he
checked,
has thoughts.
I grabbed 2 issues here because we have a hardcover as well, and I wanted to show that off. And then I was like, I think we have the article in this issue about this very thing you just asked. Not that I was going to read it, but alas, it's in issue 5. Anyway, the point is, there's been kind of an Ouroboros going on. Like, the beginning of me really getting back into SNS and doing my kind of like amateur bachelor master's degree in it, whatever, at the Merrill Collection, was I read Robert E. Howard's Shirt, but then I found something called the Appendix N Reading List, which is a sort of famous reading list. It's in the back of the 1979 Game Master's Guide to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And there were many other appendices that are all like rules, but N was a reading list of mainly author names, but some specific books that inspired Gary Gygax when he co-created with Dave Ireson Dungeons & Dragons, and like 75% of it is heavy-duty, unambiguous sword and sorcery. So it was a huge influence on D&D, but then this funny thing happened where then D&D became its own thing and like codified a lot of stuff because it's a game, you need to, right? And also it blurred in a lot of Tolkien stuff to the point that they had to change names after a while because lawyers were knocking on their door. And then it explodes in the early 80s, and then that becomes like what fantasy is to a lot of people, right? And it was kind of, I would argue, very different from sword and sorcery in a lot of ways. I mean, just because you want to have a table full of friends, right away it's more of a fellowship, whereas sword and sorcery you tend to have lone protagonists or duos, maybe, little things like that start to add up between the systematized magic and more groups and so forth. But whatever, it goes around and around. And now the funny thing is you've got, in the 21st century, you have the OSR, and it's like, let's bring back the old school D&D from the very beginning when it was heavily influenced by SNS and hadn't fully mutated and become, this new template of fantasy. And so then it's kind of funny. You get systems like Dungeon Core Classic or Barbarians of Lemuria and a whole bunch. Enough that like every year we would do the crowdfund. We have live streams every week, and I will always find at least 2 people with like a new sword and sorcery infused, inspired role-playing game system trying to capture that feel of pre-D&D, but building on what D&D was. Like I say, the snake goes round, right? And we run that for our live streams for fun. So where does it begin and end? I don't know, but it's neat watching it like go in and out and feed itself. And then of course we have literal like Matt John is an author I work with who was the head designer, I want to say, on the most recent Conan tabletop role-playing game. And he was like, well, how do I make this different from D&D? Because D&D is still out there. It's not like it went away. So, anyway, yeah. So I just think it goes round, and you get people who grow up on the gaming that then write the books, and then people read the books and they run their games with their imagination from that. And then like a percentage of those people at the table become authors. I don't know, man. I don't know where it begins or ends, but it's definitely like heavily interwoven.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like inevitable that it would have to be like an Ouroboros, just constantly feeding into itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's all here for us fantasy nerds, right? And like, what do a lot of us like to do in our spare time? D&D or fill in the blank role playing game.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, so we have to ask because we haven't really asked. It has been mentioned, but can you tell us a little bit about the latest group funding project?
Yeah, okay. So, it's on backcricket.com. If you go there and search for New Age of Sword and Sorcery, I promise we're the only one. You might need to put in the year because we've been on there a couple of years now. But yeah, 2026, of course. It is for 3 issues, issues 8, 9, and 10. 8 and 9 are straight SNS issues with lots of good stuff going on. 9 has a new Joël Jury story in it, or so I heard from earlier in this interview. Issue 10 is our theme issue for this year. Last year it was Sword and Planet. This year it's kind of Dying Earth fiction. We're calling it Time-Worn Terra as a name. Tales of a future so far, like dinosaur distant, but going forward, where the Earth is quite different and magic and technology are interchangeable, or magic has come back and usurped technology, who knows? Inspired, loosely speaking, building on, the ideas of Jack Vance, Gene Wolfe's The New Sun series, William Home Hodgson, other characters as well. If these names mean nothing to you, don't worry about it. The whole point is that it's very newbie friendly, but with details that will make the old grognards quite happy. I'm very excited about that. I'm also excited because we had a lot of fun this year. We had a little more of a budget coming in. We were building on past success. So for fun, I actually paid for a photo shoot with models in crazy SNS costumes that we used first for advertisements to get the word out there, but also for a double-sided poster that every backer gets. And I love gaming ads from the 80s and 90s, like TTRPG or video game, those ones that just have like a really, snappy line of dialogue and something kind of ridiculous that maybe doesn't even evoke the game, but it gets your attention, and so, on one side it's got like everybody is reading New Edge Sword and Sorcery, and it's like a very Jarell looking woman reading the latest issue. Actually, this issue with Jarell Jaree on the cover, issue 3 from a couple of years ago. And she's reading it. She's got like a barbarian guy reading over her shoulder. But then we also had Simon Underwood, an illustrator we work with, drawing like a 6-eyed demon thing, going like, "Oh, neat," So that's one side, and then the other side we've got like the two actors playing different, two models playing different characters. The one's more of a barbarian. That one, the guy's holding a copy of the magazine, kind of like whoa, like holding it back while she's got a knife to his throat. It says, "Take my Ness," New Edge Sword and Sorcery. "Take my Ness, there's gonna be a mess." And then at the bottom it says, like, "There's easier ways to get the magazine. Go to newedgeswordandsorcery.com." I mean, there's still fun ads now. They never went away, but I do feel like the mean average of advertising has to be a bit more sterile. So I just kind of wanted to have fun evoking that old spirit, And I mean, God, there's so much else. I mean, we've done. I know it's not humble to say this, but I mean, it's there on the crowdfunding page. We're doing okay. We've hit 200% funding a few days ago. We doubled because this is the thing. We like to live our values, and we like to share our values through our crowdfunds in part. So we like to share our success. So we have the minimum funding goal. Sure, boom, we got it. Make the 3 magazines. Then we do double art, double the illustrations. Who doesn't like more art, right? We have tons of art in our magazine, and we love that. Okay, cool. But then we share our success with our readers by having an international shipping discount stretch goal. So, because I live in Canada, I ship from the States sometimes, like, I know. So we give $5 US off for Canadians, we give $10 US off for everybody else in the rest of the world. And then after that, we have unlimited, there's no cap. We could raise $1 billion and this would keep going. Unlimited, please. We have unlimited... we have unlimited alternating author artist raises. And so we've unlocked like 5 for each, so doubled plus 25%, I guess, for our authors and artists. Authors up to like 9 cents a word now. Artists are at 125% of the base pay rate. And I was surprised because we did so well so early on. So I was like, oh, wait, I got to come up with new things to keep this exciting, for backers. So I came up with these like sidecars. So every time we get a raise, there's also something for the backers to keep it more fun for them, right? So we're unlocking flash fiction by authors that'll be put in the magazine, additional content. We're unlocking digital backgrounds for phones and desktop, of cover art and that kind of thing. And then like the individual backer who gets you over the hump of that raise, like their pledge did it, they'll get things like a short story critique from one of our authors, or I will literally mail them. Mail them vintage magazines from my collection just for fun. Why not? I've got, my shelves are groaning. And so, it just comes back to this whole vibe of like, like I said, trying to live our values through the whole thing. If we're really lucky by the end of this, I'm really hoping, I mean, I'll feel lucky if we stop right now, but if we can hit like 77,000, then we will officially triple pay for our authors and artists. That's like 12 cents a word for authors. Like how friggin' badass would that be? I love it. I mean, it sounds very, I don't know, back patty or I don't know, used car salesman or something. There's a Torontonian, I know the story about a used car salesman from Toronto. Point is, it just sounds a little funny when I'm kind of like, I love cutting big checks to artists. So yeah, but it's like I do. It's fun.
We don't mind.
Because I. Yeah, Molly's like, keep going. No, but it's just like, because I was raised by artists. I think that's an important bit of context for me in a single sentence. I was raised by 2 self-employed artists, goldsmiths. But mother was also a painter. Dad made kites at a frankly ridiculous level. And so my point is, I was raised in this kind of like bubble of like, actually, it's not crazy to mix business and art. And actually, you shouldn't feel bad, charging what you're owed and believing in yourself and that kind of thing. And also, of course, being raised by artists, being surrounded by their community of artists that they knew, obviously, I really, and being one myself, I write and been writing my whole life. I love creators. And so if I'm going to be fortunate enough to turn publishing into my job, as I have in the last 6 months, God damn, I'm going to share, that good fortune with everybody we're working with. It'd be a fool not to. And so, yeah, it's really exciting to think that, as I said that, we just got a pledge. Oh my God, we're $7 shy of 63,000. Sorry, I got a second monitor here. So that's badass. 795 people backing us so far. Look, here's my fantasy scenario. We're going to talk about fantasy. Here's my fantasy. My fantasy is by noon Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, March 14th, or a little after, because Backer Kit, part of the fun is they do overtime. So it's like when you get into the last 10 minutes before it closes at noon, every pledge resets a 10-minute counter. And then you just kind of juggle and see how long you can keep it going. We went like 2 hours last year, and we got another raise for the authors and artists in that overtime. So so whenever the hell it actually ends, on that Saturday, and I be sitting there with my traditional reward. I'm in my 40s. I got to watch what I eat, right? So, but at the end of every crowdfund, I reward myself with like a big honking meatball sub. So I'll be there at lunch with my meatball sub just going and seeing like the overtime juggle and seeing how long we keep it going. Can we get another raise? Can we keep going? Can we keep going? Can we keep going? I'm so looking forward to that. When that adrenaline rush is over and the meatball sub is all down my shirt, I hope that we have hit like 77,000 bucks, and maybe if we're really lucky, 1,000 backers. And then my head will just explode, and that'll be the final stretch goal. And as I said, that $63,047, 796 backers. So this is great. So thank you everybody who's watching. If some of you just backed us, because some people don't like crowdfunding. I've seen some individuals, seen some writers, seen some magazine editors, I won't name, go on big tears about it. And I think when people do that, it's because they find it intimidating, or they think that any intersection of commerce and salesmanship with art equals bad, right? Because we're thinking about wretched stuff from, I don't know, giant companies like Disney or whatever. And then the people, as they say this, their bookshelves are groaning with stuff that they bought, books and merch from companies that make me look like an ant. And so, there's no consistency. What it really comes down to, it tends to be, is just this feeling of it's being sold to bad. I don't know. It depends on what the people are doing with it, right? I mean, we all think about companies who make things that we really love, and we support them because they do it ethically and as much as you can under capitalism. I'm babbling. I'm on a tear here, guys. You gotta understand. We start promoting this thing a month before it launches, and now we're at the end of week 3, and I'm just every nerve ending is fried. I've had so many cans of Celsius. I'm having a beer to get me through this. I'm loving it. I'm enjoying chatting with you guys. I've wanted to talk to you so long, but the beer is helping. It's giving me energy. It's giving me life, vitality, like Sword and Sorcery. And so. So yeah, I don't know where does this tear stop? I guess my point is that I think New Crowdfund's pretty badass. I think we got these posters. I think we got all these fun things that people can get. I think they should check it out. I think it's a beautiful magazine. We put it out in this 8.5 by 11 beautiful softcover classic. We did the digital formats, of course, for financial and visual accessibility. And then here's something not a lot of people do, and nobody did when we launched. We do a lovely hardcover. We do a different cover, kind of a matte frame situation here. We have these lovely end pages designed by Babe and Oak designer, which are really fun. We have the colors changed for every issue to kind of match the two-tone situation going on here. And oh look, there's a bookmark ribbon that matches that green. That's not an accident, so stuff like that. We really try to, and I guess maybe the last thing I'll say about this, whether we're thinking about genre and writing, and I'm talking with Molly about notes on the newsreel, whether we're thinking about the crowdfund and all the fun things we can do to make it what I like to call pre-orders with a party, let's make it a good time, for God's sake, or whether we're putting together the physical object, I think a guiding light over at New Sword and Sorcery / Brackenbury Books is intentionality. Make careful choices. Think about your choices. Sure, sometimes once in a while you're in a rush and you just kind of go, I don't know, catch up. But most of the time, we really aim hard from the paper to the this and the that and everything. Think hard about what you're doing, and those intentional choices will add up over time. And just kind of let's mix metaphors. Why not? Like a stone soup. You just keep putting more and more in there, the flavor gets better. And so I really do. Pardon me?
The ketchup goes on the stone? Is that what
the ketchup goes on the stone, but also the stone is a tomato. But
okay,
also,
I just wanted to check in.
There's a chicken and who knows where this is going, right? Okay. So yeah, like I said, I'm a little. Like I said, I'm kind of riding the lightning right now as I talk here, but but it all comes from a good place. I really like what we're doing. I've got a board full of index cards. Nobody can read the handwriting. That's my cryptography plans for the rest of the year. I'm hoping we get to keep doing this thing, keep doing more. We've got more plans for Jarrell. I will not say what they are. And we've got more plans, for novellas, for the magazine, maybe more magazines, maybe more genres. I got to be honest, I've been really eyeing up crime. But right here, right now, we're doing New Sword and Sorcery, issues 8 to 10, with cool posters and postcards and all kinds of fun extras. And also discount on back issues. Never a better time to get the magazine than during the crowdfund, because you don't pay shipping till a month before fulfillment. So it's like you pay for the stuff at the end of mid-March, and then shipping's like October. And then you pay discount on that back issues, so you can get caught up real easy. We have 7 copies of issue number 1 left, by the way. So if someone wants to get a full run, you want to get running on that. And Anyway, I'm babbling. Sorry, guys. I'm having a good time, but I also am having restraint, verbal diarrhea issues. So how about I shut up, as I think I said 3 times now, and kick it back.
We're very glad that you are having such a good time talking about this. I'll just mention that your latest backer is from the chat here, fellow Torontonian, if that's how you say it, Stephen Geigen Miller, who wanted to know like 5 minutes ago, are you quoting Russell Oliver?
Who wanted to know when Oliver was still talking 5 minutes ago? Well, here's a secret. I'm a dullard. Who's Russell Oliver? Sorry, I don't know.
Oh.
Well, oh dear.
Should I know?
Quoting car dealers or something? I don't know. Maybe Steven will let us know.
Here's a new spoiler for the audience. I have a loud keyboard.
He's a footballer and a rugby player. There you go.
You're in our Discord now. Hooray. Please do stick around so you can always chat about Toronto with Steven later.
I looked up Oliver Jewelry. God damn, I hate him. Sorry. That's something else. There's a guy named, you know what? Can I have 30 seconds of slander? Just 30 seconds of slander. There's a jeweler from Toronto called Oliver, who his whole thing is called Oliver Jewelry. He's been around forever, since I was a kid growing up. And he'd come on the TV, and my dad would be like, I hate Oliver. And I'm in the other room like, what? And then I found out, it's this guy named Oliver who does Oliver Jewelry. And he's just one of those shysters who comes on and shakes money at the camera and tells you to sell your gold to him. Anyway, he was like a payday loan gold guy before that was like a real thing. And so to this day, I'm like, a shyster, sleazy Oliver who also quote unquote makes jewelry. He was like grown in a lab to drive me nuts. Anyway, but Russell Oliver, I'm not familiar with. Sorry, no. Was that a good answer?
He says Steven says he's the ultimate sales guy though, so that's where my head went.
Okay.
So yeah, I think you got the guy.
So I want to before we close out. I want to make sure, because Molly, you have a book.
I do.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us about this book you showed us so that other people can see it too?
Thank you. Yeah, so like I was saying, I love writing sword and sorcery, but I do write science fiction and fantasy in general, and I do have an arc of my forthcoming, and I just cut my nails, so I can't do that thing. It's Side by Side They Wander. It's coming out through Tor.com May 19th. It is, I've been pitching it as an interstellar art heist, which is almost true. I did get, I would never encourage any writer to look at their Goodreads reviews, but I'm only human. And I did see someone who had gotten an advanced copy say, I thought I was getting an art heist. What I got was philosophy. And I was like, that's right. You're going to eat your vegetables. And so it is an art heist. It is also a rumination on how art interacts with humanity and what makes us human, the culture of the copy, the work of 20th century philosopher Walter Benjamin, who wrote an amazing essay called The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And it is also kind of a dunk on museum culture, specifically the British Museum and their dealings with UNESCO and the Parthenon marbles and all of the feelings that I've been having since I was like a very young person studying art history in my undergraduate. So I'm really excited about it. And I think there are copies on NetGalley and it will be out very soon.
Yes.
Very cool.
Can confirm.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, you said you were reading it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
It's my first book in 6 years, so I'm really very excited. I used to publish more novels than short fiction. I've been doing short fiction for a while, so it's fun to actually hold like an object in my hands that has like my name on the cover. So anyway, I'm gonna
it's very
thank
cool.
you for asking about it. Yeah,
absolutely.
And thank you for wearing such a coordinating outfit to my cover, because you really are matching it very well. And so I just appreciate very much the aesthetics of that. So thank you.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so we're gonna make sure there's a link to the backer kit, and we'll put a link also to Molly, your book, and links to Ness and everybody's websites and stuff, so that folks can find that in the show notes for the show. So if you're looking for that, you can just go to Google or just go to the episode page where there'll be show notes. So for folks that are with us, this is the end of the show, so we're going to start winding it down. If you have thoughts, if you like sword and sorcery and want to recommend something to us or something, email skiffingfanty@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts. Happy to hear from you. If you are a Patreon supporter, you're in our Discord, which means there's a book discussion channel. You can talk about books or movies, because Sword and Sorcery is in both of them, and so is Space Opera, by the way. So you can enjoy it that way. If you'd like to find us on socials, we're like on basically everywhere except for the evil place where Joy goes to die. If you just go to skiffyinfanty.com/skiffythings, you'll find links to all of our various stuff. And then, again, 7 p.m. Central every Friday, we do our live show, twitch.tv/alphabetstreams. And then if you have money that you don't need, you can give it to us, or you could give it to Ness and back that. Or you could give to both if you've got a lot of money you don't need. Just saying. So there you go. Ours is, best way is patreon.com/skiffyinfanty. And then again, go to that backer kit and give like, a blood in your firstborn child.
Oh.
Yeah. So it'll work out great.
I don't know how you'd split that up among the authors and artists.
Yeah,
you can sell it on the black market.
For Solomon, for sure. No, you just raise another author. That's fine.
Okay.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Not a big deal. Just raise it. It takes a village. It takes 3 tables of contents to raise a child and be a sci-fi author. I think that's the old saying. Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you. Speaking of Patreon supporters, we would like to give a thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Andrea the Alluring, Cameron the Chthonic, Carolyn the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Candescent, DanDan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, JC the Jocular, Jeff the Gracious, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, Karen the Kickass, Kat the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent.
Hold on, I have to make sure that we got Andrea's name right, because I got yelled at in DMs about this.
Oh no.
It's actually Andrea the Abiding.
Andrea
not
the Abiding?
Alluring.
Is that the same person?
Yeah, it's the same person, but I'm gonna get hell for this later. So
alright, I will change it in the document.
It's okay.
Right.
I'll hear from Andrea in DMs.
The Abiding.
I'm teasing. Andrea's gonna be fine. I just want to be clear, but like, it's a whole thing. Anyway, the other people: Paul the Pious, Phoebe the Eloquent, Robin the Bold, Brian the Resilient, Sarah A the Sensational, Sarah E the Sublime, Sarah O the Rapturous. We need the other letters, by the way. Scott the Gentleman, Stephen the Strange, Tari the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, Trish the Imperturbable, and Victor the Valiant. Okay, last things. I'm at SeanDuke.net, Alphabet Streams on Twitch, Wednesday, Sunday, 6 p.m. Central, and then just put Duke Things at the end. You'll find all of my crap.
All right, you can find me, Trish, at Skiffy and Fanty, writing reviews about once a week and joining podcasts. I'm on Mastodon at Trishy Matson at newsea.social. Oh, sorry, Trishy M. And on Blue Sky at P.E. Matson. I occasionally blog at whatsthewordnow.blogspot.com. And my next appearance on the Twitch will be Sunday the 15th, playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's the second session of our new D&D campaign, kind of homebrew, being led by our own Prince Justin. And that also has Myrtle Lafferty and Darcy Little Badger and Kathleen DeVere on it. And our first session was a lot of fun. It's up on YouTube, and come join us and talk and chat.
Excellent. Okay, to end the show, I got to make it hopeful, because that is part of the Skiffy and Fanny bylaws. And so to do that, I will just remind everybody that books are a safe place that you can go escape into in any way that makes you happy. So if you're having a bad day, pick up a book and go read. It could be Molly's book. It could be every issue of Ness that is currently out, literally in a row.
Simultaneously. It's the best way to
at the same time. You need the Thomas Jefferson that, where you're like in multiple languages too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, please read, enjoy, take care of yourselves, be safe. And on that note, hopeful ending and scene.